Cool. Okay, so kind of the main idea behind this is to take the I guess you'd say the scariness out of Marx, right? Like we just had a group of people do meaning a Marxist independent study group, um, which is obviously awesome. I recommend everybody go check that book out if you haven't, or re-examine it if you haven't. But the kind of getting these what people always what we've always heard in uh, uh, bourgeois education, oh, it's confusing, oh, it's really hard, and yeah, sure, it's thought provoking, but um I just gonna kind of do my best to explain at least how I interpret, how I see it on a couple things. I'm going to look at just kind of the dialectical method that Marx took, his historical materialist method, kind of go into a little bit of what division of labor is, and then go into alienation, and I think that having a good idea on these things helps with, I mean, literally being able to read anything from Marx. And any other revolutionary thinker from there on, and it also just makes living everyday life completely different when you take these approaches or you think about these things. Okay, so please forgive me. I have an array of notes, so I'm going to be bouncing all over the place. But the first thing I want to start off with saying is Marx never laid out a plan for socialism, right? So that has to be squashed immediately, right? Marx wasn't out here being this is how socialism happens. Okay. All Marx did was study and kind of synthesize what was going on at the time, and then explained how systems of society and things go through their history, and how they evolve, and how they they die, basically, right? So but his main focus was coming to the period of capitalism, which he was in, and it has evolved in and of itself to where we are at today. By no means is it the same, but it is still capitalism. It is still fundamentally the same system, right? That's kind of what I'm going to explain. So the other thing too that gets really misconstrued with Marx is that he was mechanistic or mechanic. God, I'm just going to say mechanistic. But that these things just happened, right? Primitive communism just automatically, no matter what, was bound to transfer into tribal society, was bound to transfer into slave, which was bound to transfer into feudal, to capital, and then to socialism. So we might as well just sit on our hands, right? And it's going to happen for us. And that's not what Marx is saying. What Marx is showing is how materially through history these systems have arisen. They have kind of hit contradictions, and then they have, and through struggle, they have died, right? So the first thing in really understanding this is dialectical materialism, or Marx's idea, Marx's kind of philosophy. And dialectics is a way of discussing the system, discussing that systemically weighs contradictory facts or ideas with the view to the resolution of their real or apparent contradiction. So simple, it's back and forth conversation. Through this back and forth, we are going to come to the truth, to the answer, it's not about proving my side versus your side. It's about coming to the what we say, that we always call it debate, discussion. It's through these things that we come to democratic decisions. We come to things such as that. So when, oh, sorry. The This idea can expand to think about rise of societies. One group of people poses a thesis or a problem to other group, and then this other group responds, and this is usually like the antithesis or whatever you want to call it. And through these like between this struggle, right, becomes the synthesis of what happens, and this is what changes things. This is where the change happens, is through that struggle. And then the process starts over again, like, and that's also kind of like with the material and the dialect, like that's a big thing in the material and dialectical like way of thinking. There are several key principles to dialectics, and this is kind of where that it continues, right? One of them is everything is interrelated. An example of this interrelated or interconnected is think about like a bee. Bee population has a massive loss. The like pollination and things like that doesn't happen. And when this pollination doesn't happen, like ecosystems will die and things, you know, like they are what we like in science is called like a keystone species, right? But like this is that interconnectedness. We can look at it in like the sense of labor. When like unemployment is on the rise, there's, you know, a rise in homelessness, right? And if unemployment goes down, usually there's, you know, homelessness kind of trends. Not saying that it like goes down in rapid succession with it, but it kind of stops. And it's kind of showing this interconnectedness of things, right? This never this never ending. The next concept of dialectics is everything is changing. Nothing is fixed in time. We can see this through like life, right? From the moment we're born, we've been changing. You know, just like look at your own baby picture. You know, you don't look that way anymore. So like another way to look at this, and you may have seen it in some of the readings, or you may see it, is this idea of quantitative and qualitative, and this also kind of gets misconstrued. You know, like in common discourse, like when we hear the word like quantitative, you know, it means like the quantity of things, how many things I have. And like when you hear the word qualitative, it's the quality of the things I have. And for Marx and Marxists and Marxist thinking, quantitative is the amount of stuff, but think of it in like not in like an individual accumulation, but on like problems, right? And like qualitative is like when something, the quality of something like changes. It is it no longer ceases. If you think of like a example of this, like the straw that broke the camel's back, right? Like that's a great definition of quantitative qualitative change. You know, if you're stacking all of these straws on this camel's back, you know, that's the quantity, that's the status quo, that's, you know, capitalism kind of going through its thing, or feudalism rather into capitalism. It's just feudal society, just all these things stacking, and eventually you go to stack that millionth piece of straw, and that's what breaks the camel's back. That's the revolution. That's the qualitative change. The quality in what was there is changed. You now have a camel with a broken back and a mess of hay, right? Like it's so the last concept is the principle of dynamic contradiction. A contradiction is not a problem. A problem is something that can be addressed and overcome. A contradiction is something that cannot be solved. So for example, life and death. Death is the contradiction to life, right? Like you can't have one without the other, but like you can't be one without the, you know, like you can't be dead and alive. You can't be alive and dead, but like you're gonna die. You can't always, like that's the contradiction. And you can do like a lot of things to extend your life, but yeah, you can't evade this. And capitalism has contradictions built into it, such as the like if you just look at like the contradiction of like capital's idea of growth. It's always about growth. Well, like nature's only so much, it's finite. So like there's a contradiction that comes up, right? Like there's only, you can't grow. There's a certain, like there is a limitation to what you can do. Like when we think of resources, when we think of climate change, when we think of all of that, right? Like that is the contradiction of capitalism, like kind of showing itself through nature. The next kind of idea is materialism. And this isn't like a Marxist. Marx didn't like create materialism or anything. He like this is a philosophical thought or whatever. And what that is it's the it's a material concept of reality. It's the thought that matter developed before the mind. It's even the understanding that the mind is made up of matter. So thoughts are material actions, right? Like being a materialist does not mean that you value materials, right? Like you value these material possessions. It means that you look at the things in life and like these are what define our consciousness, our existence, our social being, right? And often the idea of idealism gets tossed at Marxists, right? Like, oh, you're just an idealist. Well, like, no, like we're materialists. Idealists are those that say Jesus, that like put ideas above the material world. This there's this omnipotent being above that is manipulating the puppet strings and things like that. So these are things that you got to look at. Like Marxists are not idealists. Like idealist is every other bourgeois ideology out there. Those are idealist thoughts. Marxists are materialists. And materialists do not mean we value like goodies, right? Like we want the goodies, but like we want them for the right reason, For Marxist materialists, they place importance in material reality rather than an ever after. So, like I said, like the heavens and things like that. Like the interconnectedness with dialectics, materialists believe that the mind and matter are interconnected. If you have mind or consciousness and you have matter, then that mind can affect the matter. By altering the matter, it alters the mind. So like this is just saying like by doing labor, we are changing things like in the material world, but we are also changing our consciousness. We are learning from this. Like this is a kind of a two-way street here, if you think about it. The example expresses the dialectical nature of materialism. Matter has to develop before the mind can think about what to do with it, but the mind is capable of looking at something like a lightning bolt and seeing its capabilities and seeing uses for this capabilities and seeing that there is something moldable and acting on it, right? So like we can still see things, think about things, and then go and act upon them, but we are still like change. Like what we think is not what we're going to get. What we get from doing the work cements like our thoughts, right? With Marx's philosophical development of dialectical materialism, he then set out about to explain capitalism through historical materialism, right? And this is kind of where we really get into Marx, like the things that people like, Communist Manifesto, things like this. The theory combines dialectical thinking and history through a material lens to see the transformation of societies. In Marx and Engels' work, The German Ideology, which I think was one of the readings, they state, we know only one science, the science of history. History can be viewed from two sides. It can be divided into the history of nature and that of man. The two sides, however, are not to be seen as independent entities. As long as man has existed, nature and man have affected each other. What this quote highlights is the importance of history and Marxist thought, as well as the importance of dialectics. This quote also shows the contradictory relationship between humans and nature. Humans and natures are always working in opposite of each other. This contradiction of nature and humans being when humans started to like produce their means, right? Like when the second that we started to produce the substances of life, like we instantly came into contradiction with the world, right? But also like the world shaped us, we shaped the world. Like it's this dialectical process. Marx states, by producing food, man indirectly produces his material life itself. With the production of life, necessities, the material world begins to transform through the hand and the head, right? So through the hand and the head, this is how we start to develop as a society. So with the production of life's necessities, a shift in the process of accumulation takes place. As tools advance, so does knowledge. Engels states, Marx discovered the law of development of human history, the simple fact hitherto concealed by an overgrowth of ideology that mankind must first of all eat, drink, have shelter, and clothing before it can pursue politics, science, art, religion, etc. That therefore the production of the immediate material means of substance and consequently the degree of economic development attained by a given people or during a given epoch from the foundations upon which the state, institution, the legal concepts, art, and even the ideas on religion of the people concerned have been evolved, and in the light of which they must therefore be explained instead of vice versa, as had hitherto been the cause. So what Engels is explaining in this quote, it's probably convoluted. Please go back and listen to this. But what he's trying to explain in this is Marx's idea of the base and the superstructure, which is a super like, I mean, you gotta have an idea of what this is to like really grasp Marx. Marx's theory sees at the base of any epoch or moment in history. That's what that word means. So if you read any Marxist literature, now you can sound super fancy, but that just means moment in history. But any epoch of history is constructed through the productive forces, right? For instance, with Marx, what Marx called primitive communism. Another thing that gets misconstrued: primitive is not against any people or a human or anything. It's not saying these people are primitive. What it's saying is they had a very simple productive force. It was very primitive. It was knife, rock, make things, kill things with this. It's not what it is today, where it's a factory of saws and crazy ass shit that cuts our food up, right? So that's another thing to have. History is constructed through the productive forces. For instance, what Marx called primitive communists had a very simple productive force. These productive forces consisted of meeting needs to sustain life. Through the process of production, ideas and behaviors took shape. This is the superstructure. That's your ideas and behaviors, politics, things like that. So the base is the economic organization of society, and the superstructure is the social behavior and thought constructed by the base. With productive forces only focusing on necessities, there was not really like a need for competition. That's why there was, a more egalitarian society or primitive communism, right? But throughout Marx's historical materialist theory, we start to see the dialectic process take shape. As necessities of life are met for the early societies, individuals start to find free time and thus allows some to start to accumulate extra, and others pursue other things or whatnot. And also, as tools advance, production becomes easier, thus causing a surplus to build. So we kind of see these things arise from this at the first. This becomes the thesis of something new. This thesis also challenges the social thoughts, bringing both the base and superstructure into a struggle. And counterforce to this, accumulation takes shape, or like I said, like I was saying earlier, this would be the antithesis. And with that struggle, like happens through this process, a synthesis arises or a solution. And this is usually a revolution. This isn't, I'm not saying socialist revolution. I'm saying, we're going from primitive communism, to a revolution, and the entire base restructures, altering the superstructure. This can also be seen as a quantitative and qualitative change. Over a primitive time, primitive communism, qualitative change to both the base and superstructure took place, ultimately ending in the qualitative change, a change in quality, meaning a revolution, or the transformation into tribal society, a new form of production. And this new form of production then forms a new superstructure. And with the superstructure, you get new ideas of God rules this, then God bestows something on this blah, blah, blah. And yeah. So the opening lines of the Communist Manifesto, Marx sums it up. He states the history of all hitherto existing societies is the history of class struggle. Freeman and slave, partition and plebeian, lord and serf, guild master and journeyman, in a word, oppressor and oppressed, stood in constant opposition to one another. So Marx is saying the second that we started to develop, we kind of built this. There were contradictions in this, right? And then with that arises class society. Class society kind of brings us into like the idea, one of the next ideas. And by the way, this is not a like total synopsis of Marx. This is just like I'm scratching the surface. So this kind of gets into the idea of division of labor. So we can look at division of labor in a lot of different ways. You can see division of labor in home between, like you look at the start of like the patriarchy, and that puts a division of labor between man and woman. But also like woman has a different division of labor between society, and then a man's a division of labor in society, because like an individual that can bear children has a different I don't really like know what to say, like a different like importance, I guess. They could do something completely different, so they have like a different strata that they're on and things like that. But like kind of a basic definition is division of labor is an economic concept which states that dividing the production process into different stages enables workers to focus on specific tasks. So just think of different dividing. Racism is a type of division of labor, a division of labor in a sense, right? As long as we're fighting each other across, like identifying black, white, and there's this like a racial tension that society has put in there, this is a division of labor. This works on the benefit of capital. So this really gets to like the next big kind of important thing, which is alienation. And I'm going to just kind of go over this real simple or real easy, and then we can get into discussing. I don't want to take too much time. So Marx took the idea, he didn't develop alienation. Alienation has kind of been a thing, but what he did is he developed in a materialist way. And this was kind of what the manuscripts covered. To be alienation is also misconstrued in society. We always hear like usually it means like, oh, people are isolated, or it's like meaningless, or or they're cut off or something like from society. Like it has a different connotation to it. But for Marx, it's not just a feeling. These feelings are consequences, not the core of the matter. The core is all alienation is an actual material fact, an actual social relation. So present world markets are alienated from our present world workers, like workers around the world, are alienated from the products of the labor. The products of their labor become alien objects that stand over and against them. We make things, and those things we come to make dominate us. An example of this is, think of a worker in a car factory who makes cars but does not own or control the cars he makes. These cars go on instead to be over top of them. This car can be now be sold to them, right? So they create this thing, but now this thing that they created, they have to purchase in order to have. So it has a higher stage, right? Or like a social ladder. Then these cars go on to create damage in other ways to human. Marx goes beyond the just like this relationship to the worker and the product of our labor. He explains labor itself. If we are alienated from our products, that must be because we actually are alienated in the labor process. The labor process is in itself active alienation. The product is only a summary of the entire labor process. Alienated labor is labor a worker does not control and has to sell it to someone else. Selling their labor power, this is called selling their labor power. Wage labor is alienated labor. Alienation is not the consequence of exploitation in capitalism. Alienation labor is constituted in capitalism. Capitalism depends on this alienation. It is through the production of the means of life that we first differentiate ourselves from animals. It's through labor and our interaction with the world we create society, we create history. We are not passive in this world. Like we are not passive act. Like history does not act upon us. We enact history. And when we start to think about that, that really changes power in our thoughts, right? Like because bourgeois ideology and bourgeois history and bourgeois thought would have us think, oh my goodness, knock my computer over, would have us think that history is acted upon us, like we are just passive beings. This is inevitable. This is how it's going to be, and that's not what a materialist thinks, and that's not how it is. We as humans act upon the world and shape our history, and when we realize that, we can really start to see what kind of power as just individuals we have. But then when we start to think of that in a collective and an organized fashion, that's a lot of power. Moving on. So all world history is self-creation of human history through labor, right? So through our labor, we've created history. You go look at anything and like the base of it is the economic structure, the laboring of humans. As a result of this alienation, we all are also alienated from ourselves and other humans, and also from nature. So it's think of anything in your house that embodies somebody else's labor, and somebody else worked on that, and yet it is here in your home. Like they did all of the work on it, but you have it, and it's vice versa. It's the opposite way in yours. So that's a very alienation relationship between humans that kind of develops, right? Like it's not like a hard concept when we think about it in that manner, right? Like a cup that I'm drinking out of right now, someone else made this cup, but it's my cup. But I didn't make this cup, but like they may have something that I made and it's theirs, but like it's not theirs, it's mine. I made that, right? Um, and alienation from nature, that's, you know, rise of property, right? Like we don't have, I don't own tools. I don't own, if, you know, if I wanted to create, if I wanted to build a home or build a wood box, even, like I couldn't. I'd have to go to the store to buy wood because I don't own, I don't like, I don't have, not own, but I don't have the ability to access anything in nature to create my own material needs. Like it has all been, um, you know, lumped up in capitalism. Labor is how we relate to nature. If the labor is alienated, then we are alienated from nature. So that's, I'm going to go ahead and stop there. I want to open it up for discussion, actually.